They took my name before I could even speak it aloud. It was carved out of me with the same precision used to strip flesh from a heretic's bones. In its place, they gave me silence, thick, suffocating, absolute. That silence was the first lesson. Obedience is not built through fear, but through the absence of self. We were 100 initiates gathered in the catacombs beneath the inquisitorial fortress, a place where light existed only to remind you what darkness looked like. The air was heavy with the scent of sacred oils and scorched metal. Every surface hummed faintly, as if the machinery itself whispered litanies to the Omnissiah. When the masters entered, they did not walk, they descended. Robed in black and gold, their faces hidden behind vox masks shaped like saints long forgotten, they moved with the authority of those who no longer remembered what mercy felt like. Each carried a brand carved with the sigil of the Inquisition, the letter I wreathed in the twin bars of judgment. One by one, the initiates were dragged forward. The brand glowed like a shard of dying sun, and the smell of burning skin filled the vault. No screams were permitted. Pain was purification, they told us, and silence was proof of devotion. When my turn came, I remember the sound most of all. The hiss, the sizzle, the faint pop of skin splitting open. The pain was not sharp, it was all-consuming. Like drowning in molten iron, I felt the world collapse into a single point of light on my flesh, and for a moment I thought I saw something behind my eyes, a throne made of bone, a figure seated upon it, unmoving, eternal. Then the vision vanished, replaced by the cold floor beneath me and the echo of my heartbeat in the void. They did not call me by name after that. I was addressed only as initiate. It was a word that fit like a chain. We were taught to kneel before the rosette, to recite the oaths not as words but as acts of surrender. "You are no longer your own," the Inquisitor intoned. "You are the Emperor's thought, the Emperor's will, the Emperor's wrath." The words sank into us like nails. For some, they brought comfort. For others, despair. For me, they brought clarity, the kind that strips away hope. At night, we were confined to the silent cells, small, coffin-like chambers where even the sound of your own breath was swallowed by the stone. There, in that isolation, I learned what it meant to think without language. Memories began to fade. My mother's face, the color of my homeworld sky, the laughter of people whose names I would never recall. In their place came new sensations, cold devotion, the mechanical rhythm of duty, and a strange comfort in pain. It was in those chambers that I first understood what the Inquisition truly forges. Not servants, not soldiers, instruments. When they released us days or perhaps weeks later, the world felt different. Every sound was too loud, every light too bright, every face too false. We were taken before our master, an inquisitor whose name was spoken only in reverent whispers, Lord Arcturus Valen, Ordo Hereticus. His presence was suffocating yet calm, like standing before a frozen storm. He regarded us through augmetic eyes that glowed faintly red, dissecting each of us in silence. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of verdict. "Some of you will serve me directly," he said. "Some will serve me unknowingly. Some will not serve at all." 2 of the initiates were taken aside then and there. Their faces showed no understanding until the bolt pistol was drawn. The sound echoed once, twice, then faded. The rest of us did not look away. We had already learned that compassion was a form of heresy. When the ceremony ended, I was given a data slate containing the inquisitorial creed and a simple knife. Read, memorize, endure. That was all. No instruction, no comfort, no promise of reward. Only the knowledge that I had been chosen, not for who I was, but for how easily I could be remade. The brand on my shoulder still burned, a wound that would never fully heal. It pulsed faintly beneath the skin as if alive. Sometimes, when I closed my eyes, I could still smell the smoke of my own flesh and hear the faint whisper of the brander's iron against another initiate's skin. That sound has never left me. It follows like a prayer I did not choose to utter. In the weeks that followed, the training began. We were broken into cells of 10, each commanded by an interrogator, apprentices to the Inquisitor, half human, half machine. Their voices were flat, their gestures precise, their patience non-existent. They taught us to recognize the scent of corruption, the subtle flicker of warped taint in a man's eyes, the hidden tremor in the voice of one who lies, the way shadows bend when demons take interest. We learned languages of dead worlds, catechisms older than empires, and the 1,000 ways to extract confession from the unwilling. Each lesson was pain, each success a deeper kind of silence. Once, during a test, a fellow initiate faltered. His faith wavered when asked to recite the Catechism of the Wound while holding a flamer to a captured heretic. He hesitated, a heartbeat too long. The interrogator's blade found his throat before the hesitation had time to become a thought. His body was dragged away. His absence was never mentioned. In the Inquisition, forgetting is the highest mercy. I did not forget. That night, as I scrubbed the blood from the chamber's floor, I caught my reflection in the oil's slick surface. I barely recognized it. The eyes staring back were hollow, stripped of color, and yet beneath the emptiness there was something else, resolve. I understood then that survival was not proof of strength. It was proof of utility. The Emperor did not require believers. He required tools. In time I was chosen, not for brilliance nor zeal, but for my steadiness. Lord Valen summoned me personally, a moment that seared itself deeper than the brand on my flesh. His chamber was lit by a single lumen, flickering weakly above the inquisitorial sigil carved into the stone floor. He spoke little, but each word carried weight. You have endured. That is enough. You will serve as my scribe until I see fit to make you more. To serve him was both an honor and a death sentence delayed. As his scribe, I would record confessions, interrogations, and the last words of those whose faith had failed. I would learn to listen not as a man but as an instrument of judgment. My first task was to transcribe the dying words of a captured psyker, a woman whose mind burned like a beacon to the warp. Her eyes bled light, her mouth spoke in tongues no machine could translate. And yet, as I wrote her words, I felt something stir within me. Pity, perhaps, or fear. Both were forbidden. When it was done, Lord Valen placed his hand on my shoulder, directly upon the scar of my brand. You will learn, he said, almost gently. The Emperor's light does not warm, it burns. That night as I returned to my cell, I could not sleep. I pressed my hand to the mark and felt the faint pulse beneath it, like a second heart. The silence of the fortress felt deeper than ever, vast and endless. Somewhere above I knew the stars burned coldly over the Imperium's billion worlds. Somewhere men still prayed for salvation. Down here we learned a different truth, that salvation is a privilege denied to those who serve. And yet, despite the pain, the emptiness, the loss of self, I did not turn away. I could not. Because in that darkness I had glimpsed purpose, a terrible necessary purpose. To cleanse, to judge, to destroy, to become the hand that reaches into the fire, so that others might never have to see what burns within it. That was the oath I carried, the oath that would shape everything that came after. I was inquisitorial now, and though I did not yet understand what that meant, the brand upon my flesh promised that one day I would. There are no mirrors in an inquisitorial fortress. Reflection is forbidden. Too many have gone mad at the sight of what they've become. Instead, the stone corridors themselves serve as our glass, cold, indifferent, and without distortion. You catch your shadow on the wall and wonder whose it truly is. The man you were? Or the weapon they've made of you? Lord Valen's fortress was a labyrinth built from silence and suspicion. Every hallway led to another sealed door. every door to another secret that was not yours to know. The air reeked faintly of sanctified oil and burned parchment. Cherubim drifted through the vaults, their mechanical wings whispering hymns as they recorded every word, every gesture, every thought that might betray imperfection. No one spoke unless spoken to. Even breath felt like confession. As a scribe, my duties were simple in name and impossible in spirit. I transcribed interrogations, documented confessions, and recorded the decrees that would doom entire lineages. But more than words, I learned to read silence, to know what truths were buried beneath the stillness of a prisoner's gaze, to recognize when Lord Violin's patience was about to end. His interrogations were not loud nor cruel in the crude sense. They were methodical. He would begin with questions that sounded like prayers and end with answers that felt like executions. I remember one man in particular, an ecclesiarch accused of consorting with forbidden texts. He wept as he swore his loyalty to the emperor, kissed the aquila carved into the table, and begged for mercy. Lord Violin simply watched. Then he gestured for me to record. "Confession begins not with truth," he said softly, "but with surrender." The man's screams followed hours later, echoing down the stone halls, muffled beneath the hum of sanctified machinery. By the time he confessed, his voice was gone. I wrote the words he mouthed in silence. Days bled into weeks, weeks into something longer. Sleep came rarely and without rest. When I closed my eyes, I saw faces, those who had confessed, those who had not, those who never had the chance. Their eyes haunted me, yet I learned to write their deaths as easily as I had once written my prayers. That was the second lesson of service. Empathy is a luxury, and luxury is heresy. Each of us in Lord Violin's retinue wore a mask, not a literal one, though some did, but a mask of purpose. The assassin known only as Serael wore serenity, though her hands were always red. The psyker, adept Kale, bore the mask of humility, though I often saw madness flicker in his gaze when the wards faltered. Even the interrogators masked themselves with faith so absolute it seemed like armor. We became actors in a theater of fear, each of us reciting lines written by the same invisible hand. Trust was a currency none dared to spend. There were whispers of spies within the retinue, agents loyal to rival inquisitors or worse, to the ordos that hunted corruption within the Inquisition itself. I learned to keep my eyes down, my thoughts guarded, my prayers wordless. Even the walls had ears, and those ears reported only upward. Yet despite the suffocating control, there were moments, brief, forbidden, where humanity tried to breathe through the cracks. Once, after a long night of transcription, I found Serael cleaning her blade in silence. The candlelight caught the faintest tremor in her hands. She looked up and met my gaze. For a heartbeat, she smiled. It was the smallest, most dangerous thing I had ever seen. Then she turned away, and the mask slid back into place. I never spoke of it again. Our work carried us to the lower spires of the fortress, where heretics were kept before judgment. The cells were carved from black stone that drank the light. Chains hung like spider webs, and the air shimmered with the heat of burning incense. I was told never to look a prisoner in the eyes, but one day I did. He was an old man, scarred and broken, yet his gaze was sharp, alive in a way mine no longer was. "You think you serve the Emperor?" he whispered through cracked lips. "But you only serve the fear of what you might become without him." Before I could respond, the guards dragged him away. He was executed before dawn. Still, his words clung to me like the smell of smoke that never leaves your skin. That night, I wrote his final words into the record as duty demanded. But I did something more. I read them again. Not aloud, not even in my thoughts, but in that deep internal place where words turn into meaning. It was heresy to feel doubt. Yet doubt, once born, does not die easily. It hides beneath the skin, growing like a seed in shadow. Lord Valen never seemed to rest. His quarters were filled with relics and fragments of heretical tomes, each sealed within stasis fields and marked with runes of containment. He studied corruption as others study faith. To destroy a thing, he once told me, you must understand it better than those who worship it. His logic was impeccable, terrifyingly so. I often wondered whether he still believed in what he served, or if belief itself had become irrelevant to him. There were nights when I could hear him through the vox grills, reciting the Emperor's litanies not as prayer, but as interrogation, each line spoken as though demanding an answer from a god who no longer replied. It was in those hours that I realized even the Inquisitor wore a mask. His was the heaviest of all. The fortress existed in a state of eternal readiness. Alarms could sound at any hour, signaling the arrival of a new prisoner, a new accusation, a new purge. We learned to rise instantly, hearts silent, weapons ready. Every order was obeyed without question. And yet, beneath that discipline, an unspoken truth lingered. The Inquisition devours its own. Every inquisitor is both hunter and hunted. Every servant is a potential heretic in waiting. It was during one such purge that I saw what lay behind our masks. A junior interrogator, brilliant, zealous, unquestioning, was accused of consorting with Zeno's relics. The evidence was thin, perhaps fabricated, perhaps true. It didn't matter. Lord Valen summoned us all to witness judgment. The accused knelt before him, trembling yet unrepentant. I served faithfully, he said. I did only what you taught me, to seek understanding. Valen's gaze was like a blade. And you have learned your final lesson, he said. Then he drew his pistol and fired once. The interrogator's body fell forward, smoke rising from the wound like incense. The Inquisitor turned to us. Purity is not the absence of sin, he said coldly. It is the courage to kill it within yourself. The words echoed in the chamber long after the body was taken away. I wrote them into the record, my hand steady, my mind hollow. For the first time, I understood that the Inquisition's power does not come from truth or justice, but from the fear that one day its gaze might turn inward. Afterward, in the silence of my cell, I pressed my fingers against the scar on my shoulder. The brand was still there, pulsing faintly beneath the skin. I could almost feel it watching me, as though the symbol itself hungered for betrayal. I wondered if the others felt it too, the weight of their masks, the suffocating certainty that none of us would ever again be truly human. And yet, I rose the next morning, dressed in the same robes, and took my place beside the others, because that is what it means to serve. You wear the mask, and in time, you forget there was ever a face beneath it. The first world I saw die was called Thandros IV, a mining moon forgotten by the Imperium until the Inquisition remembered it for the wrong reasons. Rumours had reached Lord Valen's ears of unsanctioned psychic births among the labourers, whispers of strange lights beneath the manufactorums, prayers spoken in tongues older than human memory. The Ordo Hereticus does not ignore whispers. It burns them out. We arrived aboard the Lex Dominium, a ship of black iron and gold, its hull marked with the sigils of exterminatus authority. The void outside was a cold ocean, infinite and indifferent. Inside, the air reeked of incense, promethium, and dread. I watched through the viewport as Thandros turned slowly beneath us, a scarred orb of ash and industry, its surface veined with fire. Millions lived there. Millions who would soon be names on a forgotten list. The order came with no ceremony. Lord Valen's voice over the vox was calm, devoid of emotion. The corruption runs deep. The cost of mercy exceeds its worth. A single phrase, exterminatus extremis, sealed the fate of a world. I was told to bear witness, to record every word, every ritual, every final decree. The Inquisition leaves no act unarchived, no atrocity unrecorded. The tech priests began their preparations, their voices rising in Binharic chants as they armed the cyclonic torpedoes. I remember the glow of their data sigils reflecting off the black marble floor of the command sanctum. The ship trembled as the weapons aligned. Lord Valen stood at the center of the chamber, his gauntleted hands clasped around the inquisitorial rosette like a priest at a funeral altar. "In the name of the Emperor of mankind," he said, "let the impure be unmade." When the torpedoes struck, the world ignited. There are no words for what planetary death looks like, not truly. The fire did not spread. It bloomed, unfolding like a great metal flower made of ruin. Oceans boiled away, continents split, cities became dust before they could scream. Through the viewports, the light was unbearable, a sun birthed in sin and silence. I thought I could hear something, a sound carried through the void, not voices, not cries, but a vibration that resonated in the bones, a kind of mourning that the universe itself could not contain. I wrote everything. The words felt mechanical, detached, each syllable an act of obedience. Thandros IV, purged by inquisitorial decree. Casualties complete. Corruption contained. That was the language of duty. That was how we made annihilation sound holy. Afterward, the Lex Dominium drifted in orbit over the burning remnants for 7 days. Lord Valen said it was necessary, that the ashes of heresy must cool before truth could be written again. During those 7 days, no one spoke above a whisper. The servitors cleaned the decks in silence, scrubbing blood and soot that had no business being there. The light from the dying world painted everything red. Even the lumen strips seemed stained with it. I began to dream of fire. Not as destruction, but as memory. I saw faces in the flames, men, women, children, all consumed, their eyes filled not with fear, but with accusation. I awoke one night to find my hand pressed against the viewport glass, fingertips tracing the shape of a burning continent far below. I don't remember rising from my bunk. I only remember the heat, though there was none. Lord Valen summoned me soon after. His chamber was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of sacred oils. He regarded me in silence for a long time, the faint hum of his augmetics the only sound between us. "You hesitate when you write," he said finally. His tone was not accusation, but observation. "Doubt is the enemy of precision." "Precision is faith," I bowed my head. "I will correct myself, my lord." He studied me for a moment longer, then turned toward the viewport. "Do you know why we burn worlds, acolyte?" he asked. "To preserve purity," I said, reciting the creed by rote. "No," he murmured. "We burn them because the Imperium cannot afford infection. The Emperor's dream is a corpse held together by fear and fire. We are its embalmers." He turned back to me then, and for the first time I saw something human in his eyes. Not compassion, but exhaustion. "Understand this, mercy is not a virtue. It is a delay." He dismissed me with a gesture, and I left his chamber feeling both enlightened and hollow. The ship's chapel became my refuge in the days that followed. I would sit beneath the cracked statue of the Emperor, its golden face worn away by centuries of prayer, and try to pray myself. But the words no longer came. Instead, I found myself listening to the faint creak of the hull, the murmured recitations of the adepts, the silence that filled the space between their voices. It was there, in that silence, that I realized something terrible. The Inquisition does not serve the Emperor's mercy, nor his justice. It serves his absence. We exist to act where he no longer can. When we finally left the orbit of Thandros IV, the world was gone. Nothing remained but ash and echo. Yet, even as the stars swallowed its light, I could not forget the faces I had seen, those brief flashes of humanity consumed in the fire. Their eyes haunted me, accusing me, demanding an answer I could never give. Back in my quarters, I opened the data slate and reread the official record I had written. It was clean, efficient, sterile. It made no mention of the screams, the dreams, the smell of burning flesh that clung to the air for days. The Inquisition does not record pain. It records purity. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I did something I had never done before. I hesitated to save the file. That moment of doubt was small, invisible, but it felt like rebellion. Later, during maintenance of the lower decks, I found one of the servitors still humming an old labourer's hymn, something it must have learned before its flesh was stripped away. The melody was faint, almost broken, but it carried through the corridors like a ghost of what had been lost. I stood there listening, unable to move. For a moment I almost wept. Then I remembered where I was. In the following days, Lord Varlin spoke little. The retinue moved with mechanical precision, as though the act of extermination had erased something vital from us all. Sariel's calm became brittle, her hands shaking when she thought no one saw. Kale, the sanctioned psyker, bled from his nose during prayer and whispered of voices in the void. Even I began to feel the weight of silence pressing against my chest, a silence that felt alive. One night, as the ship drifted through the black between stars, I woke to the sound of static whispering through the Vox channel. I approached it, thinking it a malfunction, but through the distortion came words, faint, distant, impossible. "We're not gone," the voice said. "We are the fire that remembers." Then the line went dead. I reported it the next morning, but the adepts found no trace, no log, no malfunction. Perhaps it was imagination, perhaps not. Lord Valen merely looked at me and said, "Do not listen to ghosts, acolyte. They are liars, but in my dreams Thandros still burns. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I think I can still hear it whispering, softly, beneath the hum of the ship, beneath the prayers of the faithful, beneath even the silence of the Emperor himself. We call it purity. But purity, I have learned, is only the name we give to the ashes left behind." After Thandros IV, the Lex Dominium did not rest. The Inquisition never rests. We are the shadow that moves even when the light dies. Lord Varlin received new orders from Terra, another investigation, another world suspected of heresy. The machine of faith grinds on, and we are its teeth. The next destination was Vortanis, a shrine world near the Segmentum Pacificus. Unlike Thandros, it was not a place of industry or sin, but of devotion. Pilgrims flocked there to bathe in the dust said to have been trod upon by saints. Its cathedrals rose like blades piercing the heavens, their bells tolling across 1,000 miles of desert. To look upon it from orbit was to see beauty, gold and marble and prayer glittering in the void. To walk upon it was to feel madness disguised as faith. We landed beneath a burning sun. The air was thick with incense and heat. The streets of the capital, Basilica Magna, were choked with pilgrims, barefoot, bleeding, ecstatic. They carried icons carved from bone and rusted metal, chanting hymns that bled together into a single, wordless drone. Some wept, others laughed, all believed. And belief, I had begun to understand, is as dangerous as blasphemy. Lord Valen's purpose was unclear to me. He offered no explanation, only orders. Observe, record, do not speak unless spoken to. We moved through the holy city like phantoms, our black armor and rosette sigils turning heads wherever we passed. The priests bowed, the crowds parted, but beneath their reverence, I sensed unease, an instinctive terror that the Inquisition never arrives without reason. The first sign came during the Vigil of the Martyrs, a festival of fire and penance that lasted 3 days. On the second night, one of the high clerics, Archdeacon Solm, collapsed mid-sermon, his eyes weeping blood. When his attendants pulled him away from the pulpit, he screamed a single phrase before dying, He's watching through the veil! The crowd took it as revelation. Lord Valen took it as evidence. We descended into the catacombs beneath the grand basilica, following a trail of whispers and forbidden scripture. The deeper we went, the more the air changed, cooler, damper, alive with the echo of unseen machinery. Candles burned in alcoves carved from bone. I noticed symbols etched into the stone, spirals within eyes, circles broken by a single line. They were not Imperial. They were older. Sirael, our interrogator, read the markings in silence. When I asked her what they meant, she only replied, "They mean someone here remembers what they should have forgotten." At the lowest level, we found a door of black steel, sealed by prayer locks. The servo skulls hovered in silence as Valen placed his hand upon the sigil of the Aquila and whispered the words of unmaking. The locks snapped open like bones. Inside was a chamber that should not have existed, a temple within a temple. At its center stood a statue, not of the emperor, but of a man in robes, faceless and hooded, his hands raised as if in benediction. Around him, thousands of candles burned in perfect symmetry. Every flame flickered the same way, as if moved by a single breath. On the altar before the statue lay books bound in human skin. The writing on their pages moved like insects. The priests who guarded this place called it the locus of true light. They claimed it was a secret order within the ecclesiarchy, dedicated to preserving the inner truth of the emperor's will. But when we questioned them, their words tangled like serpents. They spoke of visions, of voices from beyond the Astronomicon, of a second dawn that would make the first seem like shadow. Lord Valen's voice was calm as he gave the order. "Purge it!" The storm came quickly. Bolters roared, promethium burned, screams echoed off the sanctified stone. I watched as the zealots fought with their bare hands, chanting prayers even as they died. Sariel's blade cut through them without pause, her eyes empty, her movements too precise to be human. I recorded everything, as was my duty. And yet, as the last of the priests fell, one of them, an old man with eyes like dying stars, looked at me and whispered, "You think you serve the light, child, but you only carry its shadow." I hesitated. Only for a breath, a heartbeat, but it was enough. I didn't fire. I didn't call for help. I just watched as he died with a smile. That night, Lord Valen summoned me to his quarters again. The chamber was darker than before, lit only by a single candle whose flame barely reached his face. "You did not shoot," he said simply. "No, my lord. Why? I don't know." He leaned forward, the candlelight reflecting in the augmetic lens of his right eye. "Doubt again. It festers, it feeds. You will either excise it, or it will devour you. I understand. Do you?" His voice softened, almost kind. "The Emperor has no need of your conscience, acolyte. He needs your obedience. The two are rarely the same." He dismissed me, but his words lingered like smoke. I could not sleep. I walked the ship's observation deck instead, watching the stars crawl across the void. From somewhere deep within the Lex Dominium, I heard the echo of chanting, a low, rhythmic hum that should not have been there. Following the sound, I found Kale, our psyker, kneeling before a sealed viewport. His lips moved in silent prayer, his eyes rolled back. Light flickered beneath his skin like embers. "He's speaking to them," he whispered, when he noticed me. "The Emperor's shadow moves through the warp. It touches everything." "What do you mean?" Kyle smiled, blood trickling from his nose. "There's another Emperor in the dark, and he remembers every soul we burn." I backed away. Kyle laughed quietly, then collapsed. When I returned with the mechanicus servitors, he was gone, vanished, as if the air itself had devoured him. Lord Valen ordered silence. "There will be no record," he said. "The Emperor's will does not err, but I did record it. Hidden within the encrypted logs of my chronicle, I wrote every word, every impossible moment." I don't know why. Perhaps it was guilt, perhaps curiosity, or perhaps deep down, I wanted someone, someday, to know the truth. That even the Inquisition bleeds. In the days that followed, we departed Vortanis in silence. From orbit I saw the cathedrals burn. Lord Varlin had declared the entire priesthood compromised by warp influence. Another world purified. Another truth erased, yet something had changed. The shadows aboard the ship felt heavier. The lumen strips flickered longer. In my dreams, the faceless statue stood before me, its voice whispering through flame and static. The Emperor's shadow is not cast by light. It is cast by fire. I woke with tears on my face and the taste of ash in my mouth. I have begun to understand what we truly are. We do not protect mankind. We contain it. We are the priests of silence, the architects of forgetting. And perhaps, in the darkness between stars, the Emperor's shadow watches us, waiting for the day when we realize that the fire we wield does not cleanse. It consumes. The Lex Dominium drifted through the void, silent and wounded. The warp drives had gone quiet after Vortanis, leaving only the faint hum of life support systems and the occasional thud of shifting metal. The corridors smelled of oil, blood, and sanctified incense, meant to disguise both. The ship was still, but inside her something had changed. The crew walked softly now, speaking only in whispers, as though afraid the shadows themselves might listen. Lord Valen did not leave his sanctum for days. The door remained sealed, guarded by two silent custodian servitors whose eyes glowed faint blue through the haze of incense. Sarael and I were summoned only once, each questioned in turn, about what we had seen on Vortanis. Our answers were identical. Heresy purged, faith preserved. The truth lay buried beneath ritual and necessity. That is the Inquisition's true strength. Not the blade, not the bolt, but the silence that follows. But silence is never perfect. It leaks, it seeps through cracks, through the trembling hands of those who still dream. I began to hear things in the lower decks, whispers moving through the vox lines, words not meant for human ears. At first, I dismissed them as echoes of the warp, the static breath of reality stretched too thin. But then they began to form sentences, questions. Do you still believe? Do you still serve? Do you still think he sees you? Sleep became a stranger. I spent my nights reading the Inquisitorial Creed again and again, trying to find comfort in its certainty. But the words no longer felt solid. They were prayers carved from smoke. The Emperor protects, they said. But from what? From whom? From himself? Sariel found me one evening in the archive chamber, surrounded by open data slates. Her face was gaunt, eyes shadowed, armor unpolished. You're searching for answers you're not meant to have, she said. I just want to understand. There is nothing to understand. There is only service. Then what happens when service becomes sin? She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something like pity flicker across her face. Then you pray the Emperor doesn't notice. She turned to leave, but I stopped her. What did you see down there? In that chamber beneath the basilica. For a long time, she didn't speak. When she did, her voice was soft. I saw the Emperor's shadow move. I wanted to ask more, but her eyes warned me not to. She left without another word. That night, I dreamt again. The faceless statue, the whispering fire, the old priest's dying smile. You only carry his shadow. The next morning, the alarms began. Warp interference, the tech priest said. A rift opening in our path. But Lord Varlin ordered no course correction. Instead, he commanded that the ship remain still, suspended at the rift's edge. The Geller fields flickered. The air grew colder. I felt it even through the bulkheads. A presence pressing against the world, like a hand against glass. I was summoned once more to Varlin's sanctum. When the doors opened, I almost didn't recognize him. His robes were gone, replaced by simple black armor. His face was pale, eyes sunken, the augmetic lens now flickering with unstable light. On the floor before him lay Kale, or what remained of him. The psyker's body was broken, his veins burned black, his eyes hollowed out. "He called it to us," Varlan said. He thought he could hear the Emperor's voice. Perhaps he did. "What is it?" I asked. "The shadow, the echo." "The part of divinity that humanity cannot endure." His voice trembled, not with fear, but with awe. "You wanted understanding, acolyte. Come and see," he gestured toward the viewport. I stepped forward. Outside, beyond the ship's hull, space itself was wrong. The stars bent inward, devoured by a swirling darkness that shimmered like liquid glass. Shapes moved within it, vast, indistinct, and alive. I could not tell if they were watching us or if they were us, stretched and reflected through the warp's endless hunger. "It watches," Valen whispered. "Always has. We think we serve the Emperor, but perhaps we serve his reflection, the thing that grew from his absence. That's heresy. It's truth." I turned away, but his hand clamped down on my shoulder, iron and trembling. "You must understand. The Emperor's body sits upon the golden throne, but his mind burns across eternity. Some call it the Astronomicon. Others call it God. But what if part of him broke away? What if that part learned to hunger?" His grip tightened. "Faith has a price, acolyte." "And we are the currency." The deck shook. Sirens blared. The ship groaned like a dying beast. I tore free and ran. Through the corridors, past kneeling crew chanting desperate prayers. Flames burst from the walls. The warp rift outside was widening, spilling light into the ship. Light that moved like liquid. Whispering in human tongues, I reached the chapel, where dozens of crew had gathered before the altar, reciting the litany of protection. Their voices were steady until the light touched them. Then came the screaming. Flesh folded inward. Faces melted into one another, forming a single, endless chorus of prayer. I fell to my knees, pressing my hands over my ears. "The Emperor protects." The words felt hollow. I shouted them anyway. "The Emperor protects." The light dimmed. The silence returned. When I looked up, the chapel was empty. Only ashes remained, fine, grey, and weightless, drifting through the air like snow. When I returned to the sanctum, Varlan was gone. The door stood open, his rosette lying shattered on the floor. I picked it up. The sigil of the Inquisition was cracked down the center, as if the universe itself had rejected its authority. I don't know how long I wandered after that. Time lost meaning. The ship was a tomb, the warp outside an ocean of broken light. Somewhere deep within the hull, I found Serail's body, or what was left of it, kneeling before a wall of script she had carved into the metal with her own blade. "He's not gone. He is changing." I wanted to believe she was wrong, that all of this was madness, warp-born hallucination. But the brand on my shoulder burned again, hotter than it ever had before. I could smell my own flesh cooking, hear the faint whisper of the iron against skin. And beneath it, another sound, a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I followed it to the observation deck. The void was no longer black. It was gold, blinding, endless gold, as if the light of the Astronomicon had swallowed everything. And within that light I saw him. Not as the priests describe, not radiant, not merciful, but vast, faceless, and still. His presence filled the universe like gravity, and I understood what Lord Varlan had meant. The Emperor's shadow was not cast by the stars. It was cast by us, by every sin, every purge, every whispered prayer uttered in fear. We made it real. We fed it. We became it. I do not remember screaming, but I remember the silence that followed. Now, as I write these words in what remains of the ship's data core, I can feel the light closing in again. The warp hums with voices, familiar, distant, endless. Perhaps they are the souls of the faithful. Perhaps they are the echoes of the dead. It no longer matters. The Emperor protects, they say. Perhaps he does. But even protection can feel like a cage. If these records are ever found, know this: faith is not the same as truth. The Inquisition taught me to burn doubt, to silence thought, to kill in his name. But the shadow beneath that light is deep, and it hungers still. And when it calls, as it always does, you will answer, because that is the price of faith.